Yes, he's back. He's not been with us for some time because obviously we had the summer and he's been off for the past couple of weeks. And Tim Shipman's chosen to come back to the edition of PMQs where it's the B team who are playing.
I'm very excited. Sorry, that my voice didn't sound very excited. But this is a showdown, Matt, between Dominic Raab, a man who has just been demoted by his boss, and Angela Rayner, a woman who wants to demote her boss. So we'll see how they get on.
Who do you think might get the upper hand? Because they've both been... I mean, there's a joke for someone to make about reshuffles and job titles, because obviously it was back in the spring. It was after the by-election that Keir Starmer carried out a job reshuffle in which he tried to sack Angela Rayner. She ended up with a very long job title.
Well, both of them have thrown a hissy fit and ended up as the deputy, having dug in and said, I must be... if you're going to take away my actual job, you must give me a very nice title. And in Rayner's case, many, many, many titles. They'll both be desperate to show that they're better at this than the boss, won't they? And Raab will be punctilious and precise, and Rayner will have some good language and duff him up a bit. And I suspect if she can wind him up and get him doing that 1,000-yard stare across the dispatch box, then she's got every chance of giving him some grief today.
And what topics do you think might be most grief-giving?
If she wanted to go and have a tickler sort of hands in the festering wound of Afghanistan, she still could. I think the gas crisis is, and the government's handling of that is potential one this week, and how they're busy, encouraging coal and gas and all that, and how does that contrast with COP, which in a few weeks' time they're going to be telling us to get rid of all the very things that they're desperately trying to get hold of.
A government minister touring the studios boasting about how they're going to generate more CO2, so just feels a bit odd. Right, here we go then. We'll go live to the House of Commons. Just to let you know that once again, most Labour MPs have got their masks on, most Tory MPs haven't. Rishi Sunak's got his specs on the front bench. I don't know what that means.
They look a bit like NHS ones from
they're
the 80s.
Quite big, aren't they? Yes. Anyway, let's go live to the House of Commons. This is Angela Rayner.
Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member makes a very important point that I think across the House people are concerned about that. And I share the Deputy Leader's comments regarding the work of the GPs and our local primary care services. But, Mr. Speaker, can I begin by offering my commiserations to the Prime Minister after he flew away to the US and made absolutely zero progress on the trade deal that he promised us. And can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister, does the Deputy Prime Minister still believe that British workers are amongst the worst idlers in the world?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I just say to the Right Honourable Lady, for a start, I think it's excellent news that because of the engagement we've had with the US, they have immediately given us the boost to trade and businesses by reinstating travel from the UK to the US. When it comes to British workers, can I just say to her that we've got payroll employment back to levels we saw before the pandemic. We've got youth employment rising. We've got businesses advertising over 1 million jobs at a record high, and the fastest economic growth in the G7 this year.
OK, let's pause. There's quite a lot to unpick there. So Angela Rayner just sort of swatting away Boris Johnson in the trade deal, just getting the dig in there. And then following it up with this. So this is a report that came out in 2012 when a young high flyer called Dominic Raab, alongside somebody else called Liz Truss.
Who's she?
A couple of backbench MPs. They put their names to a report which said too many people in Britain prefer a lie-in to hard work. Once they enter the workplace, the British are among the worst idlers in the world. We work among the lowest hours. We retire early, and our productivity is poor.
These were the sort of young thrusting Thatcherites of the period. And don't forget, this was a time when David Cameron and George Osborne were running the show. Austerity was the order of the day. And telling people they were bone idle was seen to be good politics. It doesn't play like that anymore. And if Angela Rayner is going to be doing Dominic Raab's greatest gaffes, we might yet see questions about whether he thinks he's a feminist or not, and all sorts of other interesting things that have come out of his mouth.
If at some point we don't get mention of the sea being closed, I'll give £1 to charity. In the interest of
or Dover and Calais.
Yes, exactly.
The fact that they are so very well closely linked for our trade.
In the interest of full disclosure, the authors of this report about Britain being amongst the worst idlers: Dominic Raab, Liz Truss, Priti Patel, Kwasi Kwarteng, who's now the business secretary, and Chris Skidmore. They were all part
Poor old Chris Skidmore.
They were part of the class of 2010, described as influential members of the group, high flyers at that point. Yeah, Chris Skidmore's the only one of those not to be in the government or indeed in the cabinet.
Yep.
Never mind. Let's go back as we work our way through Dominic Raab's greatest hits. Question 2 from Angela Rayner.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, still no trade deal. And those were the words, of the Deputy Prime Minister in his book, which he wrote alongside the Foreign Secretary, the Home Secretary and the Business Secretary. Yeah. And his actions, Mr. Speaker, speak even louder than those words, because whatever they say, their political choices have made it harder for working families to get by. So can the Deputy Prime Minister tell us how much his universal credit cut and national insurance hike will take from a worker on £18,000 a year? Say a shop worker or a travel agent.
Well, I think travel agent is probably is that supposed to be a reference to Dominic Raab's Cretan holiday?
I think we may be building up to some reference to the sea being closed.
Right, here we go.
Or gazebos on the beach.
Paddle boarding all round. Let's see if Dominic Raab's got the answer to the impact of the national insurance rise.
Say to the Right Honourable Lady is that the UC uplift was always meant to be temporary. We've paid the wages of nearly 12 million workers through this pandemic. We are coming out with rising jobs, rising wages. We would have done none of that if we'd have taken her advice, not come out of lockdown. Labour have got no plan. Our plan is working.
Angela Rayner.
Labour's got no plan. Dominic Raab's got no answer to that question, I think is the main...
Well, he's got a slogan, but he delivered it with a great deal of conviction. I mean, the interesting thing, there is some proper politics here, along with the end of the Peer show. We are basically, Labour have started running adverts in the red wall seats about the cut in universal credit, as the Times reported this morning. And, I think this is the sort of thing where they hope they can claw back a few of those votes they lost in 2019 in some of those northern seats.
And that universal credit uplift is due to end the beginning of October. I think almost right in the middle of when we were at Conservative Party conference. As I mentioned, Rishi Sunak is sitting right behind Dominic Raab.
There's a sort of one smile, isn't there, as Raab goes about his business?
Yes, sort of nodding. I just want to know about the specs. Rishi Sunak's new glasses. If they haven't been focus grouped, I would be amazed.
They probably cost about £3,500.
If you're an optician and you want to get in touch about how much those glasses have cost, 87222, starting mention the word Times. Right, this is PMQs Unpacked, where we pour the action to try to explain what is going on. This is question 3 from Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, lots of words for I don't know, so let me help him. His government chose to cut the income of a worker on £18,000 a year by over £1,100. And Mr. Speaker, that's almost exactly the same as an average annual energy bill. Just as energy prices are ballooning, they've chosen to take the money that could cover a year's worth of bills out of the pockets of working people. The Deputy Prime Minister has said the solution is for people to work harder. So can he tell us how many days a worker on the minimum wage would have to work this year in order to afford a night at a luxury hotel, say in Crete?
Hey, there we go. Dominic Raab's response. Oh, he's forcing, I think, what you'd call a smile.
She wants to talk about taxes and easing the burden on the lowest paid. I'd remind her, whenever a Labour Party has gone into government, the economy has nosedived, unemployment has soared, and taxes have gone through the roof. Under this government, we cut income tax, saving every worker £1,200 each year. We've introduced and extended the national living wage, so full-time workers are £4,000 better off each year. We've doubled the free childcare for working parents, worth up to £5,000 for every child every year. When Labour takes office, unemployment goes up and the economy goes down.
Angela Rayner.
Oh, that's a positively retro response. So David Cameron used to trot out all of that, didn't he?
Well, yes, he's obviously got the figures in front of him and he's reading them out. Whereas, I mean, we've got used to the Prime Minister just saying, and moving on. That was a sort of attempt at an actual, here's some statistics. But as you say, at the start of that answer, his mouth might have been attempting to smile, but his eyes were not smiling.
The other, there's slightly, it is down to coronavirus, which was outside the government's control, at least initially. But actually trying to attack the Labour Party for saying every time the Labour Party's got into government, the economy has nosedived. I mean, that happened last year, and it does seem to be bouncing back. Unemployment's soared. Unemployment has gone up. It does seem to be coming down again now, though. And taxes have gone through the roof. Well, as we were just discussing, they're putting up national insurance.
Yeah, I think...
People are more likely to remember all of that than something that may or may not have happened in the mid-noughties or the 1970s.
No, I mean, the challenge for the government is to get to the next election and have shown that they've come through the mess that coronavirus has created. Rishi Sunak is keeping a reasonably tight control of the purse strings, relatively speaking, because he wants to spend a load of money now and then have a little bit of a nest egg that he and Boris Johnson can hand out in tax cuts before the next election. And they want to sort of, historically, what Raab said is correct. Labour governments have always historically left unemployment higher and usually the economy in less good shape. That's sometimes the price you pay for being generous with taxpayers' money to the public services. There's always a trade-off in these things. But the argument this government wants to make is this has been forced on us by coronavirus. We need to keep spending to sort out those problems. But, ideally, what they want to be able to do is say, look, we're still tax cutters, really, and when we can afford to put a little bit back in your pockets, just a few months before a general election, there we go.
Bob John Collin, the recency bias, and people always remember the most recent thing, kicks in. Andrew's been in touch saying, do we have to listen to this drivel? Heaven forbid.
Is that us or them?
Heaven forbid that either of these two becomes Prime Minister. One's smooth, the other sounds semi-literate. Not clear if she's talking about you and I or Dominic Raab and Angela Rayner. John's been in touch saying, another session of schoolboys sneering at the government by cheerful, chatty Chorley from the comfort of a highly paid job within the Whitehall bubble. Utter waste of time and wholly irrelevant to the vast majority of people outside that weird and artificial world. You're completely wrong, John. I'm not in Whitehall. I'm in London Bridge. Let's go back to the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about the economy. He doesn't even know how much his own holiday costs. So let me tell him, a worker on the minimum wage would need to work an extra 50 days to pay for a single night at his favourite resort. Probably, Mr. Speaker, even more if the sea was open.
There we go. My money's safe.
The very same week that the government is cutting universal credit, working people face soaring energy bills. The Prime Minister has said it's just a short-term problem and we'll leave it to the market to fix. So can the Deputy Prime Minister guarantee that no one will lose their gas or energy supply or be pushed into fuel poverty this winter?
Well, the Business Secretary's made very clear that energy supplies will continue, that our number one priority is to protect consumers. I just remind her, though, of her words. It was in The Guardian in the 11th of May, so it must be true. She said the Labour Party must stop talking down to people. Working class people don't want a handout, they want opportunities. They're getting those opportunities. Mr. Speaker, they're getting those opportunities under a Conservative government. With catch-up tutoring for over 2 million children this academic year, hundreds of thousands of jobs for young people under our Kickstart scheme, and helping over 1 million people on long-term unemployment out under the Restart scheme. She's right. Labour talks down to working people. Under the Conservatives, they get to rise up and fulfil their potential.
Angela Rayner.
There we are. He's not doing a bad job, is he?
No, I mean Raab is a sort of smooth professional politician. He's got a lot of knowledge and a lot of answers at his fingertips. He just always sounds just a little bit calculated. And And Angela Rayner is the exact opposite. She's full of emotion and political empathy, and it doesn't always come out in the right order. So it's a real contrast of styles, actually, perhaps even more than it is with Starmer and Johnson.
Because it always like the other way around. I mean, the interesting thing, actually, the thing that Angela Rayner is managing to do, which Keir Starmer quite often struggles with, is weaving together political attacks with a couple of jokes and facts and figures, mounting an argument in a slightly jolly way, which actually, now the House of Commons is full of MPs, entertaining the troops is part of the job.
Very much so, and that's the art of it. It's you need to be able to take the mickey out of the other one, whilst making a political point. And Starmer is a very serious chap, and sometimes his jokes. I mean, he had a few good jokes in an empty chamber, and obviously they landed, with all the grace of Zog the Dragon. But
it'd be interesting to see if this performance and the fact that she, Labour people might say she's taking it to Dominic Raab ahead of Labour descending on Brighton,
where they will descend on each other.
Yes,
in
exactly,
this fashion.
exactly. And it'd be interesting to see if her stock rises as a result. Right, let's go back. This is question number 5 from Angela Rayner.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I notice we have a shortage of hot air this week, but just as the Prime Minister isn't here, but the Deputy Prime Minister is doing his best to shore up supplies. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? He talks about opportunities. The government have axed the Green Homes Grant, scrapped the zero carbon home standard, and lost the storage facility that held 3/4 of our gas. Their failures, Mr. Speaker, paved the way for this crisis that will hit families and businesses. And as usual, it will be the British people that will have to pay the price. So can the Deputy Prime Minister guarantee that none of the workers employed by the energy companies will end up unemployed because of his government's failures?
Well, can I say to the right honourable lady, there's no shortage of hot air on that side of the benches.
I mean, it's a joke. It's all right.
The Business Secretary's been absolutely crystal clear. We're seeing the challenge of wholesale gas prices rise all over the world. We will maintain supply this year. The Business Secretary has taken targeted action to support the 2 critical CO2 plants to make sure that not only do we see energy supplies through, but also food distribution. The reality is, for all our cheap political barbs, they have got no plan on that side of the House. If we'd have listened to the Labour Party, we wouldn't have opened up, we wouldn't be bouncing back, jobs wouldn't be rising, and wages wouldn't be rising.
Angela Rayner.
I always like it when somebody at PMQs accuses the other side of cheap political barbs, when that is all that they've been doing.
It's been a very fulsome 19 minutes of political barbs so far. Raab's doing a professional enough job, and he managed to think on his feet there. I don't think, the Tories are making a good deal of noise every time he makes a reasonable point, which he'll be encouraged by. I think the interesting thing here is, I don't think there are many Tories sitting there going, I wish it was Dominic Raab doing this every week instead of Boris Johnson. There may be the odd Labour MP thinking, she's doing this with a bit more gusto than Keir does.
And what about Dominic Raab's position in the Tory party, given that he was bumped out of as Foreign Secretary? The judgment that if the Prime Minister thinks he's not up to the job of Foreign Secretary, why is he still Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, as I wrote at the weekend, I think what Boris Johnson was trying to do was put Dominic Raab exactly where he wanted him, which was at Justice. He's a human rights lawyer by training. He's written a book about it, and Boris Johnson wants him to go and rewrite our human rights laws, and that makes some kind of sense. Raab didn't particularly want to move, and he got the formal title, which is the equivalent of a political pat on the head. There've been moments today when you sort of wonder whether he is much enjoying that role, but as I say, he's doing what he did when Johnson went into hospital last year. He's doing a perfectly bang-up professional job at holding the fort that makes nobody pine for him to do it full time, which actually is exactly what his job is.
But it also is exactly what Boris Johnson would
would
want.
be very happy for him.
You wouldn't want to give the job to someone who's going to do it better.
No. which is why Michael Gove has never been Deputy Prime Minister, because he would, if you remember that speech he gave at the no confidence vote back in 2019, which was, one of the most rambunctious displays of the dispatch box any of us have seen. Boris Johnson wouldn't have wanted that standing in for him on a Wednesday.
Exactly.
He wants
'Cause
something
then people might start
that
to think,
is effective. He's not going to cause any problems, but he's certainly not going to have people looking over their shoulder and going, "Oh, what might have been."
Let's go back then. This is the peroration. This is when they'll both be grappling for their social media clips. Let us know what you think about how PMQs is going. 87222, start your message with the word Times, or you can tweet me at Times Radio. Question number 6 from stand-in Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, maybe he should go back to his sun lounger and let me take over. Because the truth is, Mr. Speaker, they were warned about the problems that we faced and the energy crisis that we faced. And there we have it, absolutely nothing to help the people up and down the country who are working themselves to the ground and still struggling to make ends meet. This is a Conservative party that does not care about working people. Families, Mr. Speaker, across the country are worried about heating their homes while he's complaining about having to share his 115-room taxpayer-funded mansion with the Foreign Secretary. Just as, Mr. Speaker, just as the truth hurts, doesn't it? Just as his government are making choices that are making working families' lives harder. A typical family, Mr. Speaker, are facing a tough winter this year. Universal credit down £1,000, rent up £150, gas bills up £150, taxes up and food prices are soaring. Working people will have to choose whether to feed their kids or heat their homes. The choice for the Deputy Prime Minister is, will he make their lives easier or harder? So what will he choose, Mr. Speaker? Will the government cancel the universal credit cut?
That's quite a lot to unpack there. So the Chevening story that she was explaining, give us the background of that, Tim Shipman.
Raab was the Foreign Secretary, and the Foreign Secretary traditionally gets Chevening, though Chevening has also been held by the Deputy Prime Minister, because Nick Clegg had it when he was Deputy Prime Minister. He is no longer Foreign Secretary. Liz Truss now is. Funnily enough, she wants Chevening, and he's like, well, I'm the Deputy Prime Minister, so I want it as well. I suspect they will be made to share it. One can only imagine the house party that would undergo, if we had friends of Truss and friends of Raab gathering. I would imagine it'd be like one of those slightly awkward discos when you were growing up, where all the boys stand around the outside while the girls are going a bit mental around their handbags in the middle of the dance floor.
You get the feeling they might have to have some sort of awkward sort of timeshare spreadsheet where one of them books it, knowing that the other one can't be there. We had Lisa Nandy, who's obviously the Shadow Foreign Secretary. She was on the show in Chorley on Friday, and we asked her about this, and she said she'd already been texting Angela Rayner, and they were planning big joint parties, so they were more than happy to share Chevening. Not that they're measuring the curtains or anything, but which was the one that Boris Johnson, David Davis, and Liam Fox had to share?
That was also Chevening.
Was that Chevening?
Yes.
That was in the Theresa May area when the three Brexiteers, all in bunk beds.
Yes.
Yeah.
David Davis kept going around telling people that he didn't care and he wasn't interested, but spent a lot of time talking to journalists about whether or not the other one was stealing the key from the other.
With 115 rooms, they could probably sort themselves out. On the broader point, we finally got the sort of the convincing sort of the point that I suspect Angela Rayner will be posting on Twitter imminently. Will they cancel the cut to universal credit?
Yes, I mean that's that's the only meaningful bit of politics in this, apart from what is in Angela Rayner's punchy fashion a quite convincing the Tories don't care about working people, and when she says it you sort of think that Labour maybe do, and I think Starmer's problem has been convincing a lot of his own former voters that his Labour Party does, and when they hear it from Angela Rayner I think they're more likely to be persuaded.
Very good. So that was Angela Rayner's final shot. Let's hear how Dominic Raab responded.
Can I say to the right honourable lady, she should check her facts, because Chevening is funded via a charity, not a penny of taxpayers' money. Let me also tell her the most disastrous thing for energy bills of hard-working people across this country would be to follow Labour's plan to nationalise the energy companies, which the CBI say would cost as much as £2,000 on bills. Mr. Speaker, this government's the one taking action to take the country forward with a plan for the NHS, a plan for COVID, and our plan is working. Employment up, job vacancies up, wages up. If we'd have listened to the party opposite, we would never have come out of lockdown. We're the ones taking the difficult decisions, getting on with the job, and our plan is working.
And that brings us to the end of the main exchanges of PMQs Unpacked. Dominic Raab there, obviously standing in for Boris Johnson, who's still in America. Just on that question of the privatising energy companies, I've just looked, because I do remember this was actually from 2017. A poll then by YouGov found 53% of people supported the idea of nationalising energy companies.
This was always the thing with a lot of Jeremy Corbyn's policies when he was basically saying the state should buy everything. A lot of it was hugely popular. The problem Labour had was that when you did 10 or 12 of these policies instead of just one or two, people wondered where the money was coming from. But individually, a lot of these things are quite popular. So it's always been slightly dodgy terrain for the Tories. But what they would, what Raab did there is, a line that Johnson's been using, we've got a plan and it's working. No one really knows quite what the plan is. But Lynton Crosby, who is the sort of former Tory election guru, who is back in Britain and he's back around Boris Johnson's dinner table. You need a plan, Boris, is what he tells him. You need to tell people you've got a plan. David Cameron used to have a plan for,
the long-term
economic plan. Nobody knew what it was, including David Cameron, but people were reassured that there was such a thing.
But it got longer and longer, famously, because it was initially just an economic plan to abolish the deficit in one parliament, and then it became a long-term economic plan because it took slightly longer than they expected.
Boris Johnson did this. Lynton Crosby made him do it when he was London Mayor. When he was getting re-elected, I think Boris Johnson had a 9-point plan for London. I once asked him what the 9 points were, and he managed to get 4 of them out before scratching his head and going, how about some food?
It's really interesting that. And that gives us a real insight into what, how the politics of the next couple of years in the run-up to the election will pan out. On the big question that everyone is talking about, Rishi Sunak's glasses. A Treasury source has been in touch to say they are not new, but he often wears his other ones, so he's got more than one pair. Apparently, these are his serious thinking glasses.
Is that really the kind of spin that we're paying for? Maybe we're not paying for it, like Chevening, which is a trust.
Maybe a charity is dealing with
maybe a charity supply the glasses.
Supply the glasses.